I don't know. It's just too hot. Too hot and humid to snap. There it is. Welcome back, artists. I'm Wyatt Paints. And this week, a returning sponsor, 3D Files, has sent me a classic sculpt of probably the most popular X-Men ever created, Wolverine. And seeing as I've done Wolvie in the past, I left it up to my patrons as to which paint scheme we were going to use on old Logan. Even though my nemesis Yellow appeared on the list multiple times, I had absolute faith in my patrons and fellow artists to spare me some punishment. And you could probably tell from the thumbnail just how well that went. It's okay. It's okay. You guys just thrive on my pain. Regardless of my impending doom, I loaded up Marvel vs. Capcom 2 to do a little bit of research. Thankfully, when it comes to painting this model, I don't have to worry about getting stomped by some sweaty tryhards online. I can just focus on the fundamentals and get reliably good results. So, meet me over at the painting table. I'm gonna grab my brushes. Let's get started. Taking a look at the base, we have a very familiar Canadian wilderness scene, and there's a touch of added drama with this destroyed tree. We should definitely do something fun with that. Now, for the most part, this is going to be straightforward. Gray stones, brown tree trunks, white snow. I did have an odd layered line here, but with a touch of sanding plus the texture of the tree, it should be pretty hard to notice. To start us going, I'm going to lay down a deep gray base over pretty much everything short of the trees. While the stones getting a gray base makes sense, throwing a gray undercoat on the snow will allow me to establish the lighter tones later. So the focus should be on getting smooth coverage. Issues here will only get worse with more layers of paint. Let's lighten things up with some uniform gray. And I'm using a medium dry brush to pick up all the surface details of the rocks pretty quickly. Just don't force the bristles into the cracks and you should get some pretty easy one-step shadows. Finally, company gray and a very light dry brush should only catch the sharper details and help the rocks come to life. Keep this step very light, just so as to not overpaint the previous step, and you should get a decent transition. Now this area stumped me for a while, as I knew it couldn't be snow or rock with that texture, so I assumed it was some earth poking through. I had based this earlier, but the shade wasn't doing it for me, so I swapped to this darker tone. A quick adjustment had me back on course. Now to give that dirt a bit of character, I dabbed in some mocha skin to highlight some of the small rocks in the mass. I really don't want this area to draw a ton of attention, but not painting these rocks would have left this dirt area looking very plain and flat next to the rocks. So it's a bit of a balancing act of a few, but not too many. At the end of the day, it's a judgment call, and here felt good for me. To mirror the dirt element, I gave the entire section a thin wash and left it at that. Moving on to the tree stumps, I might as well use the colors named after them, starting with Ancient Tree. These have a slightly redder shadow hue compared to what we used on the dirt, and while I'm usually an advocate of using fewer shades while painting, sometimes subtle shift in tone can pay dividends. And in a project like this where there's wood, dirt, and the brown in his suit, having a bit of separation will help prevent it all feeling a bit too matchy-matchy. Once I got the base done, the tree got an all-over wash treatment as well. This is going to help all the sculpted tree texture stand out a touch. You will most likely want to come back and give it a second go. I know I did. Now that everything is well shaded, let's lighten things up with Dryad Brown. Keeping this at a medium rough dry brush is going to build up a grain of the wood nicely without the risk of blowing out your shadows. While I'm doing this all over, it's a good time to start thinking about where I want the final highlights to lie. There's no real rhyme or reason to it, I just try to take note of parts of the tree and roots that stand out to me. Once I was ready to move up to fur brown, I had a really clear idea where I wanted this highlight to lie. So slowing down and really honing in where you want it is important if you want it to matter. Because if you put it everywhere, then nowhere special. Though, to be fair, once I put on the snow effects, this one is going to be hard to notice. After giving it some time to dry, I was ready to tackle the broken tree here. And I'm thinking a smoldering stump is in order. And no worries, it's going to be a whole lot easier than it sounds. First, I'm going to take some molten lava to base the top while creeping it down the sides slightly. The most important part here is to really get the paint deep into the cracks, because really that's the part I'm painting. This is going to make sense in a minute, but for now, give the end of the tree a nice lava glow up like it's a big giant cigar. Next, I swapped to flickering flame and switched it up to a strict stipple on the top end, while trying to maintain a ring of darker orange around the edge. I'm doing this because fires get brighter the hotter they are, and they're hottest at their core. So you can think of this as highlighting in reverse. Now before the flickering flame completely dries, I jump straight up to inner light. If I'm quick enough, I can stipple this in and get a quick mix with the previous color. If you do this, just remember to only use a stipple. Any kind of scrubbing will mix it too much and possibly make bubbles. So stick with the friendly stabs. Then let it completely dry so that you can come back later and add a bit more inner light that will sit on top right at the center. Okay, now I have this nice glowing hot tree stump, but now it needs those char bits on top. And this is simple enough to add with some flat black and a natural sponge. Now you don't want too much paint on your sponge or you'll just flood the area, so give it a few test taps before you touch your model. What I'm looking to do is to build a patch malted pattern on top of the glow, and I have to keep strict control of the sponge taps to do so, just straight up and down. Any scrub motion and you'll get smearing and ruin the effect. Overall, I'm looking to cover only about 30% of this in char, but I need to make sure to extend this past the glow line. In fact, getting a bit heavy here will help camouflage the transition to the glowing bit. But even with all those things you need to keep in mind, above all else, this is your project. Go as heavy or light as you want to. There are no wrong answers. Heck, even I went back and added a touch more myself. The thing is though, the black is only one part of this effect. Now I need to layer on some appropriately named ash gray on top of the black, again using a sponge with simple stamps. The only real visual guide here is to concentrate this on areas where you have the most char, and just try to keep this to about 10% of the surface. This is definitely a less is more step. Moving down to the snow, I started putting down some company gray. Now, I could leave the snow as it is, but in my experience, snow only gets this smooth, rounded look if it hasn't been disturbed for days. But with the busted tree and this being a very active battlefield, that didn't really make sense to me, so I plan on adding a bit of texture paint to this. Thing is, that stuff works best if you only want it for the texture. Asking it to be a decent paint as well is a high bar, and working with it can be a bit of an exercise. That's why I'm being a bit cavalier with this undercoat. Any areas where the snow bumps up to another surface is going to see some buildup of that texture anyways, so no need to stress. Now for the actual texture, of course I'm going to be turning to Snow Tex. It's cheap and does the job. And let's face it, this is basically glue with silicone beads in it. So long as you don't expect anything more from it, you're going to be golden. And because I'm treating this like a glue, I'm using a cheapo brush. And I do mean cheap. But other than that, this is a pretty fun section of the project as working with texture paint at this thickness starts to become part sculpting. Just let your mind wander as you spread this on aimlessly. And remember, you can always come back to add more, so leave that option for yourself by going light on this first pass. I was most of the way through and it just wasn't clicking until I realized I needed some snow clinging to the trees as well. While the natural stump got a random all over dusting, I went with a different direction with the second one. Since it's actively smoldering, most of the small wisps of snow would have melted or been knocked off. The only parts that would remain are in these woody armpits, so the wisp got kept to a minimum. Sometimes just telling yourself a story to explain the scenes can inform you on how you should paint the details. While I let my base chill out and dry, I'd like to take this moment to thank my subscribers over on Patreon. Your continuous support helps keep the engine running. And this month, I was able to pick up a new light and backdrop for taking the final photos of the models. So, I can't thank you enough. If you would like to join the Painting Pantheon, you'll find a link in the description below. You can join for free to get insights on upcoming videos. Or you can support the channel right here on YouTube by subscribing and liking this video. It's the #1 way to make sure it gets in front of more eyes. And I can't talk about support without mentioning this week's sponsor, 3DX Files. They provided this week's STL, and so far, it's crossing every T and dotting every I. And in a few minutes, you'll find out how Wolverine himself turns out. If you would like to get your hands on this model, be sure to check out their link below. Heck, you might just find your next project. For now, our buddy Logan came here to chew bubblegum and kick some ass. And right now, he's out of bubblegum. Let's get to it. Let's get going on Logan's suit with Brigandine Brown. My idea is to go from the darker colors to the lighter ones, as cleaning up an overspill from the lighter colors is pretty trivial. With that said, I'm looking to base all of the brown sections of the suit, and I can't forget about those boots and gloves. And look at the wings on those booties. With that down, let's move over to Bootstrap to begin the highlight. This is a step where it really gains its volume and becomes the color we want it to be. But you gotta keep a tight leash on this. You don't want to wash out all those deep shadows. So keep this light and let it build up slowly. Finally, my peak highlight here is Leather Brown. As a final highlight, this needs to be super soft and deliberate, so be sure to do some test strokes to see how the paint is coming off your brush first. This is going to help prevent any situation that would have to cause you to repaint. Also, as you paint, constantly ask yourself, does this need more? And be as honest as you can. If need be, set it down and come back in a few minutes once it's dry to ask again. Sometimes you just gotta let it fully cure to really see your work. Now for the yellow bits, I'm starting by basing in burnt turf. Now, I may have set myself up for disaster, leaving it up to my patrons to pick the color scheme. A little voice in me told me, you know they're gonna pick the yellow one, but I disregarded it, saying, no way, my patrons know exactly how I feel about yellow. Including them is just a courtesy. They wouldn't really make me do it. Well, I stand corrected. But, you know, when you punish me, I will just take it out on my brushes. And that is exactly how I fell victim to one of the two classic blunders. The most famous of which is never get involved in a land war in Asia. The second and only slightly lesser known is to not zone out too hard that you end up doing waterboarding levels of brush abuse. And on top of that, the model was looking pretty gnarly. But that's okay, it happens. It's a burn, but I've got two things going for me. One, because I 3D print, I have plenty of 99 proof IPA on hand. That plus a toothbrush will quickly eat this down to the bare resin. Just wear gloves, be well ventilated, and move your okay parts far away from the splash zone. And second thing I've got going for me is all the steps are pretty easy to repeat to get me back to where I was. But first, I noticed a couple of support marks that snuck by me, and I need to take care of them now before we have a bat nipple situation. And my name isn't Schumacher, so I can't get away with that. After a sand and prime, a quick stepping through the browns got the torso right as rain. Just in time to go back to burnt turf and the thin coats I should have stuck to in the first place. Just know, even with a tan like this over black, it's going to take more layers than an egg farm, so get comfy. And don't worry, I learned my lesson from the last time. Going fast will just lead to spending more time going back to fix it. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. With the solid opaque color, I moved up to Barren Dune. Just like with the browns before, this middle tone is going to really fill out the volume over the shape, so you want to do this over a good 70 to 80% of the surface, while still being mindful of those soft muscle shadows. And while I am trying to avoid the already brown areas, cleanup here is pretty trivial, as a quick once over with Love the Brown will knock down any random overspill. Just don't make it excessive and you should be fine. To finish off the pants, I added some seam shading along his legs. It's important to pick these out as they act as guidelines for your eyes to quickly understand the movement of the seam. But remember, it'll only take a touch. Moving on to his skin, I grabbed a triad of Mocha, Cobalt, and Corpse Pale. Though truth be told, I only used the first two. I don't always use the third tone I grab, but it's always nice to have. Starting with Mocha, I based all the exposed skin, just being careful of the yellow. But being mindful about painting inside out, it was time to take care of the mouth. So a touch of basilisk red to base the tongue, followed by pure red for a highlight. Then I used a bit of pixie pink to block in his gums. Next up, Ancient Stone is a perfect shade for his teeth. If you're feeling eagle-eyed and have steady enough hands today, try to dial it in to hit individual teeth. Details like this will elevate the whole project. If not, you can always do the solid line like I'm doing with the bottom row as well. Either way looks good. You just have to be mindful about which one you can pull off. But these chompers are looking a bit too Marvel Zombies, so I wanted to add a quick wash to tone things down and meld everything together a bit. This has the added benefit of settling in between the teeth to give them a bit more readability in those details. And since Logan has a habit of smoking stogies, yellowing teeth kind of fits. Swapping back to the skin, I finished off the mocha base and cleaned up a bit of the overspill from the mouth. Then, adding more and more cobalt, I lighten up the mix and paint smaller and smaller areas on the face, then blend it out with the rest. And that's it. It'll be just a matter of repeating this process over and over again until I hit the complexion I like. And for me, it was about at full cobalt with just a touch of corpse pale. Of course, now I just need to repeat this process for his arms. No problem, I'm on it. Same steps, same goal, just larger areas. So, easy peasy. The next step is to take care of all the black accent panels across the suit. So his boots, gloves, panel lining on the torso, and the wing panels of his cowl. No mystical paint secrets here, just thin it down and slap it on. And slow it down to get clean lines on the cowl. Once I laid this down, I threw a dab of light gray in each eye to dry. Then I hopped back down to the legs with crimson to fill in the belt and a little bit of black for the insignia. Finishing up the belt gave the cowl plenty of time to dry. So it's pretty much a simple matter of slowly closing in the eye with a bit of black paint until they look right. But I couldn't just leave the mask like this, and giving it a light dry brush of deep gray to make his expression much more readable through his mask. Just be careful, if you put too much pressure, you're gonna have to be repainting a lot. Now for the final detail of his claws. I started with a quick base of my favorite, black metal. And I'm thinking it's about the point I should get another bottle of this just to have on hand. I'm always reaching for this as an undercoat for any of my steel type metals, as usually the darkest you ever see is gunmetal, which is actually the second stop for his claws. With this brighter metal, I'm going to be pulling focus to the edges of each claw and only getting full coverage on the backhand of each blade. Finally, a bit of metal medium and a super light touch here got the claws looking their best. And a touch of plate metal chromed up his claw guards. All that was left was to glue him up and call him done. And Tornado Claw, Wolverine! This came out beastly. I do not envy whoever he's fighting because the only thing they did was piss him off. And surprisingly, I finished this Wolverine without a drop of blood. It's official, this Wolverine is family friendly enough for the Fox universe. But what do you guys think? Do you like it, or do you think I should have went with a different color scheme? Well, either way, you could have had your voice heard in the poll that chose it. So be sure to check out my Patreon and you could chime in on the next one. And also, I'm going to be doing a giveaway soon for a few of the painted models from my past videos. You'll have to be a member to be a part of that. Yes, it'll include the freemium tier, and no, being a paying member will not increase your chances. It might take a few weeks for me to figure out all the ins and outs on how I need to pull it off, but getting in early means you won't have to think about it later when I mention it. And once again, thank you to this week's sponsor, 3DX Files, on another banger of a sculpt. If you want Logan for yourself, be sure to check out the link below and find out how you can get your hands on this model. For now, I've got to get going on the next project, so you know what that means. Thank you for watching, stay creative, and always enjoy the process.